Imagine this. You're sitting at a dinner party in 2035. Half the women at that table aren't married, aren't in long-term relationships, and not because they couldn't find someone, but because they chose differently. That statistic sounds shocking at first, right? Nearly 50% of women will be single by 2035. But the real question is, what does that actually mean? Is it a crisis? Or is it freedom finally being rewritten? So yes, by 2035, half of women may be single, but that's not a tragedy, that's a revolution. It's a shift from obligation to empowerment, from settling to soaring, from I have to I choose to. And maybe, just maybe, that's the future we should all be excited about. For generations, society has handed women a script to follow. It was a neat little roadmap. Grow up, be pleasant, find a man, get married, have children, and stay in that lane until the end of life. The unspoken rule was that happiness, status, and even identity was tied directly to whether or not a woman could fulfill that role. If she did, she was celebrated as complete. If she didn't, she was whispered about as if something was missing. But here's the truth we've started to see with brutal clarity. The old script is broken. It was written at a time when women's choices were limited, when their opportunities were boxed in, when survival was linked to attaching themselves to a provider. That world is gone, yet many people are still carrying around this outdated expectation like it's a sacred document. When a woman today chooses to live differently, she isn't rebelling just for the sake of it. She's stepping out of an outdated mold that no longer serves her reality. Think about it. What happens when you no longer need marriage for financial stability? What happens when your education, career, and personal independence are enough to give you security? Suddenly, that script doesn't feel like the only option. It feels restrictive, almost insulting. It's like being handed a phone book in 2025. Technically, it can still work, but why on earth would you use it when the world has moved on to something smarter, something better? And this is why the statistic about nearly half of women being single in the next decade shouldn't shock us as a tragedy. It should open our eyes to the fact that the old rules don't apply anymore. Women are rewriting their own stories. They're realizing that fulfillment can come from building businesses, from creating art, from traveling, from deep friendships, from inner growth, and yes, sometimes from relationships too. But the critical difference is that relationships are no longer the only measure of success. In fact, clinging to that old script has left generations of women quietly miserable. How many stayed in loveless marriages because that's just what you do? How many traded their dreams for a promise that didn't deliver? When women break free from that cycle, they're not just rejecting a man. They're rejecting an outdated belief system that says their happiness is conditional on someone else choosing them. By 2035, when nearly half of women are single, what we're really seeing is not a collapse of love, but a collapse of a broken narrative. It's the rise of something far more powerful, a life designed on individual terms, a story authored not by tradition, but by choice. Let's face it, standards in relationships have changed dramatically, and that shift is one of the biggest reasons we're heading toward a world where nearly half of women will be single by 2035. In the past, relationships were about survival. A century ago, marriage wasn't just a romantic choice, it was a lifeline. For many women, financial stability, social acceptance, and even personal safety depended on securing a husband. A good match meant security, and a bad match still meant survival. There wasn't much room to question compatibility or fulfillment, because the stakes were too high. But as society evolved, education opened its doors wider, careers became possible, and financial independence became a reality. That old dynamic collapsed. Suddenly, women no longer needed to accept a relationship simply to survive. They could now choose a relationship only if it added something meaningful to their lives. This freedom has transformed the way women view love and partnership. They're no longer satisfied with the bare minimum. Where once a paycheck and a roof over your head might have been enough, Now it takes emotional intelligence, respect, empathy, and partnership in the truest sense. Women want relationships that enhance their lives, not ones that weigh them down, and this shift in standards creates an interesting paradox. While women are more open to love than ever before, they're also far more selective. They don't measure success by having any relationship, they measure it by having the right one. Of course, this means fewer relationships pass the test. When standards rise naturally, the pool of acceptable options gets smaller. But here's the key: that isn't a problem, that's progress. Because what's the alternative? A generation of women stuck in unfulfilling, unbalanced relationships, simply to tick a societal box. Higher standards may result in fewer partnerships, but those partnerships are healthier, happier, and far more sustainable. They're built on mutual choice rather than necessity, on genuine compatibility rather than obligation. It's also worth acknowledging that this shift hasn't just raised standards for women, it's raised them for men too. In the past, men could walk into a relationship with the assumption that financial provision was enough to hold things together. Today, that's not enough. They're being asked to show up emotionally, to communicate, to evolve, to grow alongside their partner. That might feel uncomfortable for some, but in reality, it's the only way forward. The relationships of the future will not be about filling traditional roles. They will be about building partnerships where both people bring their best selves to the table. So yes, as women's standards rise, the number of traditional relationships may decline, but the quality of the ones that remain will skyrocket. Being single becomes a more appealing choice when the alternative is settling for less than what you deserve. And by 2035, that choice won't be viewed as radical or rebellious. It will simply be the natural outcome of a world where women have the freedom to expect more, demand more, and refuse to apologize for it. One of the biggest misconceptions we've carried for decades is the idea that being single automatically equals being lonely. It's almost as if society has painted this picture where a woman who isn't in a relationship is sitting in a dimly lit room, scrolling endlessly, waiting for someone to choose her. But when you look around today, that picture couldn't be further from reality. Single women are traveling to countries they once only dreamed of. They're running companies, they're buying homes, they're forming deep communities of friends and family who enrich their lives. In fact, many are discovering that their single years are the most empowering, adventurous, and joyful periods of their lives. The assumption that you need a romantic partner to avoid loneliness is outdated because companionship now comes in so many different forms. The truth is, loneliness isn't tied to relationship status, it's tied to connection. There are countless people in relationships who feel desperately alone because they are with the wrong partner, someone who doesn't see them, hear them, or value them. On the other hand, there are single women who feel incredibly fulfilled because they've cultivated meaningful friendships, strong family ties, vibrant careers, and passions that give their lives depth. Being single doesn't strip away your ability to connect. It actually frees you to choose who you connect with, without compromise. That freedom can create a richer social life than many partnered people ever experience. There's also a powerful psychological shift that happens when women stop fearing singleness. When you no longer see being single as a curse, you stop grasping for anyone to fill that space. Instead, you begin to build a life that excites you on its own terms. You start prioritizing your growth, your happiness, and your passions. And here's the irony: that kind of independence is magnetic. When you live fully without waiting for someone else to complete, you naturally attract relationships that are healthier and more balanced, because you're choosing from a place of abundance, not desperation. This is why by 2035, the growing number of single women won't represent loneliness. It will represent choice. Women are no longer afraid of the label single. because it doesn't define them. It's just a season, sometimes even a lifestyle, that allows them to focus on creating the life they want. They can invest in friendships, pursue dreams, and build futures that light them up, without waiting for a green light from anyone else. That isn't loneliness, it's liberation, and it may just redefine what true companionship looks like in the future. When we think about the future of love, the idea that nearly half of women will be single by 2035 often sparks fear. People imagine a world where marriage is collapsing, where commitment is fading, where love itself is somehow in danger. But the reality is very different. Love is not disappearing, it's evolving. In the past, relationships were built on obligation, on pressure, on external expectations. You married because it was what you were supposed to do, because the neighbors were watching, because your family insisted, because society told you that your value depended on it. But when women no longer feel forced into that system, love begins to transform into something far more meaningful, an intentional choice rather than a default path. The future of love will be about quality, not quantity. Instead of rushing into relationships to avoid judgment, people will take their time, evaluate compatibility, and ask the harder questions. Do we actually want the same kind of life? Do we share values? Do we respect each other as equals? For decades, those questions were often ignored in the urgency to settle down. But the freedom to remain single gives women the power to wait until the answers truly align. That means fewer rushed commitments, fewer marriages entered out of fear, and more relationships rooted in genuine connection. There's also a deeper kind of honesty emerging. When you're no longer defined by your relationship status, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to stay with someone just because you're afraid of what people will say if you leave. You don't have to settle for mediocrity because it's better than being alone. That honesty reshapes the foundation of relationships. Couples who choose each other in this new era are doing so because they truly want to be together, not because they feel trapped or obligated. That creates a bond that's stronger, more resilient, and far more fulfilling. By 2035, the definition of love won't be about checking a box or following a timeline. It will be about intention, choice, and alignment. Women who remain single won't be symbols of failure. They'll be reminders that love is not the only route to happiness. And women who choose relationships will step into them with clarity, knowing they could be happy either way. But they've decided to share their life with someone because it enriches what they already have. That's not the end of love. That's the beginning of love in its most authentic form. As we step back and look at this picture, the statistic that nearly 50% of women will be single by 2035 no longer feels like a doomsday prediction. It feels like a turning point. For centuries, women were handed a narrow definition of fulfillment, one that revolved around marriage and family, and while those things can still bring immense joy, they're no longer the only measure of success. What's happening now is nothing short of revolutionary. Women are reclaiming their agency, rewriting their definitions of happiness, and choosing lives that reflect their true desires rather than outdated expectations. Singleness is no longer a symbol of failure. It's a symbol of freedom. This shift also forces us to re-examine the very meaning of relationships. When you remove necessity, what's left is intention. Women today don't need a partner to survive. They want a partner who makes life richer, deeper, and more meaningful. That means the future of relationships will not be about checking boxes or settling under pressure, but about aligning values, nurturing respect, and building partnerships that stand on real connection. And though the number of relationships may decline, the quality of the ones that endure will be stronger than anything we've seen in the past. It's important to remember that single doesn't mean alone. In fact, many women are discovering that their single years are some of the most fulfilling chapters of their lives, filled with friendship, growth, exploration, and self-discovery. By embracing independence, they cultivate lives that are whole and satisfying in themselves. And when love does enter, it's not out of desperation or fear, it's out of choice. That choice creates healthier dynamics where no one is settling and no one is trapped. The result is a future where companionship is not about filling a void, but about building something extraordinary together. So, as we look ahead to 2035, let's stop framing this shift as a crisis and start seeing it as progress. Half of women being single doesn't mark the death of love, it marks the rebirth of it. It's the end of a system that confined women to roles they didn't choose, and the beginning of a world where love is built on freedom, authenticity, and intention. This is not a story of decline, it's a story of evolution. And perhaps the most exciting part is this: when love is chosen freely, without fear or pressure, it has the power to be more genuine, more lasting, and more beautiful than ever before. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today, and for being part of this important conversation. If this message inspired you, challenged you, or even gave you a new perspective, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Your support means the world. It helps this community grow and reminds me why I keep creating these talks for you. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss future uploads. Each video is crafted to bring you more clarity, confidence, and power in how you see yourself and your relationships. I always love hearing your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Let me know what resonated most with you, or what part of today's message spoke to your own journey. Your stories inspire not just me, but everyone who reads them. Until next time, keep choosing yourself, keep growing, and keep living with intention. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye for now.